G'day and welcome back to Critical AFL on YouTube. This Friday before the mid-season draft next week, as well as the weekend of footy ahead, on what feels like the first cold day of the year here in WA. Today we'll be covering the mid-season draft and what West Coast are expected to do with this year's crop of hidden talent. I've had a lot of people asking in the comments over the last month who I expect West Coast to take, and I definitely think I have to profess that I'm not particularly personally well-versed on the mid-season draft, just for a couple of reasons. One, the crop of players tend to have a little less exposure right up until the last minute. And then two, it's usually just one player anyway, maximum two. So it just doesn't generate the same level of attention on the individuals. So basically, a lot of what I know is just piggybacking off information from other sources like Kaltumi, as opposed to, say, the national draft where I get to watch the national carnival, form my own opinions of the individual players rather than just regurgitating, I suppose, other people's version of how they see them, and then add those to the rumours that come out about who's linked to each club. So I don't think it's a particularly damning admission, but I do like to pride myself on making my own individual observations of everyone I talk about. And this is more just basically a summary of the information that's going around, and then a little quick glance, I suppose, at some of the guys that do get that main attention, because there is still stuff on the internet in the form of footage and stuff. So what I'll cover in today's video is firstly just a quick summary of our recent history in the mid-season draft, then a wrap-up of Tom McCarthy, who is apparently firmed as our number one pick. I just wanted to be really careful also that this video doesn't become one of those annoying, drawn-out ones that doesn't give you the one thing you started watching for until the very end. So I'll just say it now. Tom McCarthy is apparently the player that West Coast are expected to pick, very strongly expected to. He's a 187 centimetre midfielder from the VFL, and I'll give more detail when I get to that section as well. And then finally, I'll give a quick overview of our other or alternate options entirely for the mid-season draft, just including the fact that we could have two available list spots and what we might do with them. So kicking off, I found our recent history in the mid-season draft quite interesting, mainly because when you hold top picks, it's not so much the top-up, I suppose, those top-up needs, like what we're going to see from Essendon this year, just trying to find a replacement ruckman. I'm not sure if anyone's aware, but they've lost both of their ruckmen to injury. But it's actually almost the equivalent of an assistance package having that top pick in the mid-season draft, because it's really an additional genuine footballer most of the time that's comparable to someone you might pick up pretty reasonably early in the national draft. I'm not sure about other fans, but I do feel that as an Eagles fan, we should be a little bit too proud to go requesting an assistance package the way that North have in recent years, especially since this year an end of first round pick which is really what you get from assistance packages. It's probably going to be around pick 40 anyway, so it's not really worth stooping to that. But in the last 4 years, West Coast have taken Jai Culley with pick 1 in the mid-season draft. I think it was in 2022. Ryan Marich with the pick 1 in the mid-season draft in 2023. I think ironically because we freed up a list spot because Jai Culley did his ACL in the lead up to that mid-season draft. And then Jack Hutchinson with pick 3 in last year's 2024 mid-season draft. So out of that, we've managed to pick up 2 players who are firmly in our best 23, with Ryan Marich playing pretty much a specialist role, distributing out of the back line, and Jack Hutchinson becoming an absolutely essential pressure player in our midfield, who alongside Jack Graham has been really setting the standard for some of our most important metrics to keep us competitive this year. And I say that because if you've been watching, for anyone who's been subscribed all year, you probably understand that I've been talking a lot about the lack of pressure across our midfield and how much that's killing us above any other metrics that we could be struggling in. So that's pressure, acts and tackles, but just defensive midfield work. So unfortunately, things didn't work out for Jai Culley. But on average, holding that first pick in the mid-season draft has often been regarded as the equivalent to, say, a middle to end of first round pick in the national draft, which is more or less what I meant with the assistance package comment. If you count the number of effective young draftees that we've brought in over the last 4 years, the mid-season draft has really supercharged that aspect of our rebuild that we were really far behind on to begin with. I mean, that's a whole nother video if I were to go down that path, but essentially we needed a lot of young talent quickly, and you've got 2 extra talented top 23 players through this mechanism. So it's worked out really well for us. The next one is, though, so looking at what we'll be adding this year, it's apparently quite straightforward. All the noise really suddenly arrived in the last fortnight that West Coast will be taking the number one prospect, Tom McCarthy, from the Richmond VFL side. And I was really excited to see his profile because it is such a good fit for what we need, which is a high-performing mid. Tom McCarthy is 24 years old, so it's got a lot less of a project pick to it and more of a plug-and-play option. Project, being like your 19, 20-year-olds, Joe Cully type sort of potential. He's 187 centimetres, like I mentioned earlier, and most of the experience that he's got is as a midfielder, like I said, although I do understand that he's been getting played off half-back quite effectively this year too. So I've taken a look at some of the available footage online as well, and he looks like a pretty no-frills player. So there's a possibility of him getting a bit of an accumulator angle to our side, which is what we need. I've been saying it for quite a while this year that what West Coast currently really lacks is someone who can just rack up disposal counts. Doesn't have to be, a power player, but just can get their hands on the footy and therefore let other players get their hands on the footy just that little bit more. He has been averaging over 22 disposal being moved to halfback this year, but has been a midfielder up until then, like I mentioned. How I see him fitting in? Well, the first answer is that even though we don't have an elite full-time midfield, we do have a heap of competition for spots at the moment in that part of the ground. I've basically said on a weekly basis that Clay Hall needs to be called up to the AFL side. And I also think the same about Tom Gross, who's been the sub for 2 weeks in a row now, but is also being pushed forward. So right off the bat, he'll probably be a top performer in the Waffle Eagles at the very least. And given the performance of the Waffle Eagles the last few years, the idea of bringing in an experienced mid, 24 years old, as opposed to, a kid, who would be at the top end of the talent for the state competition is exciting. The side's already been competitive this year, and something as small as that will hopefully keep the momentum going, which for me is so important for the development in our rebuild of all the guys playing in that side. An AFL level, I'd also love to see how he could fit in because at 24, there is an element of him potentially being that plug-and-play player. So it'll really just be a question of how quickly he starts performing and excelling inside the Waffle when he joins us, if he joins us, to see whether he does get that AFL opportunity and then come through with that real hope that I've got that he could be a bit of a ball magnet, hopefully. So that's a little rundown on what most reliable sources say is the player we're expected to pick up at the MSD next Wednesday, mid-season draft. But before the day comes around, there's also an outside chance that we could free up one more spot to take another player in what you would call, I suppose, the second round of the mid-season draft, although there's not too many rounds. A lot of clubs just pass even in the first round if the guy they're looking at gets taken. But if that comes around and we do free up another list spot by Wednesday, I'll just give you guys a little bit of a heads up on the other rumours that West Coast have been connected to. There's apparently 2 other players on our radar. One is former Geelong midfielder Brandon Parfitt, who's 27 years old and is currently dominating the Waffle. I think he's averaging 30 disposals a game. And he was a premiership player, I understand, as well for Geelong in 2023. So that's a pretty big deal. And the other is medium defender Michael Selwood, who is 186 centimetres and posting really good stats and potential as well from where he's playing. So both guys are in WA, by the way. Personally, I'm unsure how the additional spot is expected to be freed up. My understanding of our list was that West Coast kept a list spot open at the end of last year after both the national draft and then Malachi Champion coming through via Category B rookie listing as a next generation academy player. But then we did fill that spot when we signed Sandy Brock via the SSP around about the same time or just after Dom Sheed tore his ACL, which is what I understand is what left us with the spare spot for this mid-season draft right now for that number 1 pick that we've got. So for anybody who isn't aware how it works, if you have an injury on your list that is confirmed to rule a player out for the current season till the end of the season, so that makes you eligible to fill their spot on the list at the mid-season draft. Obviously, from there, that leaves you with 1 player too many over your total list number going into the next season. So it does force the club to delist at least 1 player at the end of the season just to bring the list size back to its maximum number. But that's not really anything outrageous since clubs delist players every year either way, just to make space for their draftees. But anyway, that is my understanding of our draft hand going into next week. Basically, another player would need to join our long-term injury list for us to roll deeper with that number one pick in the draft, which I'm sure everyone watching would agree would not be a good thing, especially with some of the question marks being put over Jeremy McGovern's long-term future. So yeah, as always, thank you very much for tuning in. And that's pretty much everything I've got to add for the mid-season draft and West Coast next week. Quick summary is that I think we're likely just to pick up one player, but it'll be the best player in the draft and someone who's a really good fit for West Coast. Also, if you're not a subscriber yet, please consider subscribing to the channel, as I'll be back again this weekend with my usual reviews of both the Waffle Eagles on Saturday evening and then the AFL match against the Crows on Sunday. So hopefully I'll see you all again for those. And until then,